without further ado, this is Lucinda, who happens to be a friend of mine, and she and I work together at the Boston Beer Company. And she will be presenting on building a sales team to scale with your brand.
Thank you, Lee. Y'all, I'm so excited to be with this group. I was telling our little breakout group that I begged Lee a few months ago. I was like, what is this amazing thing you do? What is this women's group? What do I have to pay to the thing to be a part of just this? So I'm really excited. And just to plug, thank you also Lee and Paige for hosting the call that y'all held about the board meeting. It was fascinating. I actually just learned a lot about the structure and mechanics of a board. So, and also everybody going to MJCon, please live stream it in the Slack. I would like to live vicariously through all of you there. So just to give a little bit of my background, my name is Lucinda. My company is LTO Consulting. I say out loud, I was born and raised in the beer business. I was not as a baby, but I got into Bev Alc as soon as I could. I was hired by Boston Beer Company when I was 21. And I was Boston Beer Company makes, now their biggest product is Twisted Tea, Truly, Sam Adams, Angry Orchard, kind of a whole portfolio of brands. And I was with them for 14 years. I moved around a ton. I moved 7 times in my first 7 years with them. And then I landed in Dallas about 13, almost 14 years ago. But I have done everything that there was to do as far as on the sales team, whether that was calling on retail accounts, calling on a distributor, working with national accounts, you name it, I did it there. And then after I left Boston Beer in 2020, I actually worked at Andrew's Distributing Company, who is based here in Texas. They're one of the largest Constellation Molson Coors beer distributors in the country, definitely the largest in Texas. Did a handful of jobs, including category management. It was 2020, so I also spun up their online ordering portal for all of their retailers who needed access to place orders online as well. And then I left and I got out of the business. I went and worked for a private equity-backed mission-focused company, which is a total oxymoron, and I'd love to explain that deeper at another day. But loved that experience, kind of going from startup energy and running small businesses was kind of their consolidating small businesses was their go-to. And so that taught me a lot about financial background, P&Ls, et cetera. I left ultimately because I wanted to follow what really gets me out of bed in the morning, which is people. And was like, I have to figure out how I can do this training, how I can do this coaching. So I've been out on my own now for about 1.5 years, doing full-time, both executive coaching and then kind of go-to-market sales and strategy. It's a really lovely kind of blend of work that I've been doing just based on experience and things. And I got into the hemp category by way of Lee. I was honored to and lucky enough to work on the Happy brand with her. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today, you'll see shows up. We actually have some examples in here from a tequila brand that I work with, but it's all kind of 3-tier specific. But Lee and I, a lot of the work that we did in this call are things that Lee and I thought a lot of hours on when it comes to building a team. So, because I know that this category is still very new and there's so many new founders every single day that we wanted to think about what's an intentional piece of advice that we can provide to everybody here. Whether you're a founder or you're a or just an associate, of the industry, I'm hoping there will be good value, key takeaways. So just to kind of start and make sure we're all on the same page here, you think about whatever your product is. It could be myself selling me as a value-added executive coach. You start this product and then you start to actually gain momentum and you're like, what am I doing? Okay, so I need to hire people, right? I need a team. How do I build this team? What I don't want anybody on the team on this call to do and to think about very deeply is don't go out and start just hiring people for the sake of hiring people. What I want to take you guys through today is a little bit more of a rational methodology and my best recommendations inside of 3-tier as well. I have seen too many people just start hiring people, and the trigger we want to pull in CPG seems to always be, let's get somebody out calling on accounts. Let's get somebody in selling shelf placements and displays. Sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. But this is where I want all of us to think about a couple different things before we potentially decide on the type of role we would hire into our teams. And another important part that I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole on today, but as a founder, you do have to think about what are the things that you're doing as a founder that you potentially can offload. And I have some great books and some great workshops that I did also as a founder, but it could be something as simple as bookkeeping. It could be something as simple as your operations. Neither of those things are simple in themselves, but they are things that if you're a one-person show or a couple of people, you're all doing all of that. I think most of us on the phone have probably been in some capacity of a startup environment. And I encourage you all to think about when you get to the point of what doesn't make sense to offload. When you start getting to the point of like, you're having to research a little too much, how do I input this into QuickBooks? Start thinking about a bookkeeper as an example. When you're starting to think about, man, I have to go deliver X, Y, and Z, and I need to call this buyer back, and where am I at with this distributor on this meeting? That's what we're going to really get deep on today is how do you decide what's the right time to start hiring a team? They're the most important thing you can do to support not just your P&L. It's going to be the biggest expense you have, but it's going to develop your culture and it's going to develop your brand identity. So there's so much more that goes into it besides just, okay, let's go make some calls, right? So a couple things that the things that I've seen, and I'm going to tell you guys a lot that like, I very much believe in fail fast. Try something, but don't be afraid. It's okay if it doesn't work. You learn by doing, but there's a couple things that I think we can help you with as well, so that we're not just jumping in head first into every single area. So you need to define your job. I don't want you overpaying for unclear roles. Your sales reps, God love them, regardless of how much experience they have and how much they know about this particular market, this particular distributor, this particular category. You've got at best a 50-50 shot that it will work out without any type of onboarding or training or expectations. When you hire somebody and send them off to their own devices, it becomes really challenging to reel them back in and start over. So having those things defined before you actually get into these roles, I think is really important. And there's a couple things I want everyone to think about in terms of the brands, right? Where are we in terms of our overall brand development? Are we purely D2C right now? Are we gaining some distributor relationships? Am I pulling through on the shelf? Do I have actual like resales that I can say that I can take to retailers and talk about? If you can start to think about those things, that's where you're really going to start to have a great success story to bring in for your sales team. So you could, hang on, I got to click through the right way here. I'm just clicking everything on. Okay. So I'm going to get into this a little bit deeper when I talk about these different types of roles. These are kind of some common job titles, if you will, that are used in the beverage industry and largely across a lot of CPG brands as well. But really, like if you're a little baby brand, if we're a startup, we're starting D2C, we're starting to explore if we want to get some distributor partners, you're probably founder led. And to be honest, that's a really great thing because if you're a founder, you are the brand. You are the brand identity, you are the values, you are the vision of that brand, and retailers and consumers love to connect with you as a founder. I think that is just such a key part of building a brand. When you start to grow a little bit, you're going to want to start to think about bringing on brand ambassadors and then a combination of distributor managers, which I'm going to get into because I think that that's actually kind of a sweet spot. So like I said before, there's so many great salespeople out there that are great salespeople in spite of themselves. And I just have seen so many people that are really wonderful naturally. They have all these natural qualities that make them great salespeople, but without the boundaries and without the expectations and the goals set in place for them, they can spin a little bit. And they setting priorities and saying no when you should say no are probably two of the things that I coach the most often with any level of a salesperson, because it's their inherent nature to just go run through walls, even if it's not the right wall for your brand. So to be able to sit down and define a scorecard with goals, and then how are you going to onboard this person? What's the coaching that goes along with that? Those are important things to do before you think about, because then you're going to be able to envision what is the right human for this role, right? And the best job descriptions or the best interview processes, they come with job descriptions, but they also come with like a list of competencies, kind of. And competencies are what I talk about. Like there's a qualitative things that make you successful and the quantitative. Quantitative is what I've been talking about, the salesperson that can go run through walls. They can probably close some business for you, but it's the what and the how, right? If you have a person who's going to go run through 100 walls for you and go close 30 different stores today with new placements on the shelf, that's great. But if they're kind of a jerk while they're doing it and they kind of piss off everybody else around them, they don't follow up with their distributor, it's probably, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some brands that that's fine with, but that's probably not the approach that you want for the long term. So when you think about what you want them to accomplish, also think about how you want them to accomplish it. I have a whole kind of training framework, but the before, during, and after the call are really important. I had to get this plug in here. I come from Boston Beer Company, and I was really lucky to have had a lot of great training and expectations, and then some great mentors that helped reinforce that. I cannot implore y'all enough to think about the process. And it's really, the process is all about the best practices that you have and use with your team day in and day out. And it's like I said, the what, the how, it's like the art and the science. The salespeople all have the art. They're charismatic. They can talk to anybody. They can carry a conversation. Hopefully they can close. But once those relationships stop, once they've maxed out everybody that they currently know, then they have to dig into their toolkit, and they have to actually be able to sell. They have to be able to speak about the brand. They have to use data. They have to use talking points. They have to educate. And those are things that all come into this training framework. So there's a lot of different reasons to expand your team, and I've talked about a lot of them. This answer will be different for everybody, and depending on what space you're in. If you have a product where in some way, in some category, you have, whether it's D2C, retail, whatever, you have proven pull through, then I think we're ready to expand. Even if that's maybe your farmer's market or wherever you're going. There's a farmer's market right around the corner from my house, and there's brands there every week, y'all. But when you really think about, do I have that proven product sell through? Then I want us to think about, okay, great, let's go. You have a use case for success. And then this is one thing I wanted to talk about that we're launching, and there's actually some pros and cons to this. And I'm going to give you an example of a spirits brand that I worked with and still work with, because we had a lot of key learnings. This is a proven brand test case, and this is really relevant in the 3-tier space, which I know most of the brands on here are probably a combination of D2C and retail. The distributors are your best friends. Anybody who is in Atlanta, I loved how strongly that message came across. I love the panel where you had the BA, the WSWA, you had Craig up there. It was Chris up there. It was awesome because they are the key to your success in any market where you go retail. And so with anything hemp beverage related, we know that that's going to become increasingly more important as we continue to grow this category. Here's a couple things that we did wrong at Yabe. This brand was all over the East Coast and really great success, really great product. Launched Texas, and we focused a little too deeply on having street level sales. So like a brand ambassador, if you will, go out and manage the state. And then myself, as a basically fractional sales manager, part-time, was managing the distributor relationships. And when I say managing, all of y'all know the term managing is this wildly broad term. This could be, where's my order, tracking somebody down from a PO, what's on incentive, what's our SKU? I mean, the list of things that it goes into managing this distributor relationship is really long, but it's really important because this is an enterprise B2B level selling relationship. And what we didn't do is we didn't prioritize that enough. We also didn't prioritize the time. The time that the team needed to be coached and trained and onboarded and everything brought up to speed. Going into a market like California, which that brand will be launching in California, Southern California only, start with your distributor focused roles. You want to hire somebody who can manage those relationships for you, and you probably have experience in the 3-tier space. And I'm talking really specifically about 3-tier. And Lee and I weighed the pros and cons and the benefits of, do we want somebody out hitting 60, 70 accounts a week, or do we want somebody going to the distributor that can educate their team, set an incentive? And a good distributor on a good incentive can deliver several hundred pods over a 60, 90-day incentive window. They have the relationships in the market. There's so much you want to think about when it comes to how you manage those relationships. And it's wildly nuanced. But so sorry to give a tequila example, but I think it's pretty interesting the way we learned that and how quickly we learned that, just, even with my experience just this past year. So what I want you guys to do is, before you think about hiring a salesperson in any way, sit down and map out what's important to my brand. What are the things that I want them to be selling? Where are we going to sell them? Am I in Chicago? Am I in North Carolina? Am I in California? Am I in Texas? And especially for all of us on the phone, to whatever extent we can all keep up with it. What are the regulations? What are we going to be up against? What are the objections they're going to get, both from a distributor and a retailer perspective? You want to map all of that out, right? What does great look like for them? Do we want them to hit 10 accounts a day, or do we want them to take every distributor's call that comes in throughout the country because we want to launch with them in their market? If you can do that, then you're probably ready to think about hiring a salesperson. And then you want to back yourself into planning this financially as well. I can't implore you enough that there's a lot to think about when it comes to hiring for a new role that hits your P&L that are sneaky. It's not just your salary. It's, are you going to pay benefits? And if you're going to have them as a W-2 employee, are you ready to pay payroll taxes? Are you going to have any additional benefits package like retirement? It's totally okay to pay them as a 1099 employee if that's something that works for them and they don't need benefits. But there's a lot that goes along with that. They're going to be out at retail. Are you going to pay for a car allowance? Are you going to give them a sample budget? You start sending somebody into accounts, talking to retailers, there's resources that they need. And key ones are samples. They're pieces of point of sale. They're the collateral that you want showing up at your accounts, both with buyers and consumers, as they're out talking about your brand. And those things all cost the brand money. So I'm on my soapbox. I will slowly step back. I do have a website and I have a lot of tools built that are turnkey. But so please check them out. The girls that work with me were like, don't forget to plug the Founders Toolkit. But literally, I spent hours and hours and hours this summer putting together this Founders Toolkit. It's a bunch of different tools, and they're tools that I've used in my life in real time over the course of the too many years, over 20 years being in sales and marketing to build different brands in different markets. So they're a great resource for you. But moreover, I want to be a continued resource for you. So this is one of many things that I know y'all will consider as you're building these brands and building the companies. And there is never a one size fits all answer. So if something I said feels like it doesn't fit for your brand, good, ignore me. That's great too. But hopefully there is at least a couple little snippets that will be helpful over the long term. So I'll stop with a few minutes left. just to see if we have any good questions. And I see a couple that Julie, thank you for that. Scorecards. Yes. Scorecards are important, Julie. Thank you. And I actually love that book. You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike. That's a good one. Okay. Did I miss anything, Lee?
No,
Lee's been in sales and marketing as long as I have too, y'all. She could write this.
Oh, you meant about your presentation. Oh no, I thought it was great. Like I thought you meant for the comments. The hidden costs could not be emphasized enough because they absolutely sneak up on you, and suddenly you're looking at expense reports and noticing just how much money can fly out, out the window for point of sale and samples and God knows what else. Yeah. Kelsey.
Fabulous presentation. Thank you so much, Lucinda. This is perfect timing for us. We are at a stage where we're like in that middle stage. And I think we might have made the same mistake that Yahweh did, in that we've got tons of demos going on in every new market with third-party demo service providers. And that was driven by our distributors. Mm-hmm. They all said, you gotta do the lips to sips. You need to be pouring money into demos. You need to give us an unlimited samples budget. So we followed their lead, their request. Mm-hmm. So that's one challenge. And I guess I'm just sharing with any other brand that might be hearing the same thing. Maybe we want to look at it differently. How would you balance that urgency that we hear from the distributors with the more strategic, slower rollout of find the right person in the market, make sure they are trained and resourced, and then they can build the street level sales team?
Yeah.
But we're all like under the gun right now to get into every market as fast as possible.
Yeah. So it's such a great question, Kelsey. Thank you. And thank you for asking it. The couple things that I would consider are, one, if your distributor has a sense of urgency on your brand, that's awesome. That's wonderful. Love that, because a lot of times they don't. But it's easy for them to tell you to go do all these demos because they're not paying for it. And there's a balance in when you think about, if you have a really great salesperson covering that market that's also able to manage that relationship with the distributor, they're going to be able to balance both. You may be able to do fewer demos, but you're going to be able to have a stronger connection directly in with those distributors at all of the levels, right? Mm-hmm. Part of managing a distributor relationship is also getting into the car with the right salespeople that are covering those territories where you're doing all those demos, right? And you may be able to make more movement getting introduced into some of the key sales accounts with a really strong person in that market than you would with 50 of those demos that you would have done. There's also third-party demo companies are not all created equal. There's a whole list. If you're not getting at least a 30 to 40, hopefully 50% conversion rate and if they're not tracking that, they should be. But that's something to think about too, because I absolutely think you should invest in demos. It's so important, especially with the ambiguous nature of this category. But balancing that, don't be afraid to pull back if you need to invest in other areas. Is the really long answer, I think.
Thank you.
I see Laura.
Yeah, I was actually just going to piggyback on that, Kelsey. Because our company, we do demos, right? And we come across all walks of life of brands, from small to bigger brands. And when distributors do that, some brands, one of the big things we ask is your budgets. And when you're trying to be in a whole bunch of places at the same time, that's probably not the best strategy. Typically, what we recommend is, it's great that you want to be in all different states, but at the same time, it's what's going to give you the most traction, right? So maybe it's more of a concentration of markets where we use the 80-20 rule. What are your top 20 accounts that will give you the 80% traction, and then concentrate on those and use your demo agency to concentrate on those, right? Because, demo agencies is expensive, and you have to be smart in how you budget that as well. and at the same time trying to support the right markets that are giving you, the growth that you're needing. Some brands want to grow really fast. If you do, you're going to spend a shit ton of money. Some you just grow organically. So it just really depends. So I definitely wanted to thank you, Lucinda, because that's something, the budget thing is definitely a big contender, especially when you're trying to build a sales team. Like, what's your budget look like? Because as a rep, I used to rep a tequila company, and I was a rep for 2 years. I was a Texas state manager, and holy crap. I mean, like, they wanted to do everything. I'm like, but you're giving me a sliver of a budget. So let's be smart about it. So definitely know your budgets before you go out spending money aimlessly, because you will lose that money so quickly and maybe not even know where it's going. And that's not obviously a good place to be.
Yeah. Really great input, Laura. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the presentation.
I think Corinne was next, I think, if I'm getting it in order.
Hi. Yeah, I was curious a little bit about this. So I come from CPG, my primary accounts were Whole Foods and big natural grocery channels before. And we saw such an infrastructure exist in those with distributor relationships that I don't see materializing here yet with field marketing. But what we would always do, and what I would have my sales team do, is make sure that whenever we sign those contracts with distributors, we agreed up front on what the quarterly promotions were going to be, what the budgets for those were going to be, and made sure that our demo commitments were tied to those quarterly promotions, that they were getting the extra POS placement, the extra shelf tags to actually support. And the way we saw demos was, it really wasn't for us. It was almost a slotting fee. Right. This is for the store. This is for you to build your relationship and support the store. And it's sure, there is, you're going to convert maybe 2 or 3 people and have an actual maybe long-term sale with that. But it's a perk that you're giving the store. They all love to say there's no slotting fees, but in CPG, especially in specialty grocery, that was the unspoken slotting fee, was your commitment to demos. And the only way we actually made them profitable is if we tied them to the quarterly, to predetermined promotions, and figured out a way to staff them. And this is where it gets tough, I think, with a lack of field marketing agency support in this current industry, for you to be able to pull it off all in one blow, so you can maximize the marketing spend tied to it at a greater regional level. So I guess my only really real reason to raise this hand was to try to get that cooked into your contracts from the beginning.
Yeah, I love that, Kurt, and I would piggyback that, whether it's okay if your contracts are already signed, sealed, delivered to. It's never too late to go back and have that conversation with your distributor about, we are investing this much in the market and we need X, Y, and Z out of it. And those should always be an ongoing discussion and leverage point, whether that's, like you said, POS placement, display execution, additional points of distribution. And it could be something as simple, y'all. Gosh, I'll go down this rabbit hole. Sorry. It could be something as simple as, like, can I get a little bit better shelf placement in this store? Can I get to eye level in this store? Right. If I'm going to do a demo. So really great. And I know we're going over, but I'm happy to stay and still answer questions if that's okay, Lee.
Yeah, of course. If you guys have to go, obviously feel free to do so. But if you have more questions for Lucinda, and Lucinda, you have the time, I don't see why not. And then her presentation will be in Slack. So just so everybody knows.
I think I see. Is it? I feel like I'm gonna say this wrong. Leonie. Leonie, thank you. I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay. And it's interesting hearing from this perspective, because I am a distributor. So I can tell you, like, having just gotten into this game, we felt like we had to, when we got new suppliers in, we felt like we had to walk them through the process. There's a lot of things that THC suppliers are not as familiar with, the 3-party system and like how it works. So like, I would tell those people that haven't done that, you should spend some time with some spirits and wine suppliers and get their feedback on how to do that. When you're walking into a distributor, you should be asking for things that you're not asking for right now, which is data. And we're starting to build up the data here in New Jersey, but that's one thing you want to know. You want to know, like, tell me about how much business you're doing now with THC. What are your top brands? What are your brands? So that you're like a little bit more familiar with that organization. We have a very unique situation. We hired what we're called category development specialists to handle this. So our THC is not sold by sales reps. We just felt like they weren't going to educate enough on the brand as needed. We needed them to focus on spirits and wine because that's still a category. And we hired Gen Zers to basically go out there and sell this product. We did sales and merchandising to make sure that as we get it in, we're looking good on the shelves. Obviously, New Jersey, along with Minnesota, like top markets for THC. We're doing very well in New Jersey. But one of the things that we did different for people that are going into new distributors is we tasked our CDS team and our merchandisers to conduct the tastings. We still charge the supplier, but at a fraction of the cost that they're normally charged. So for example, we charged $100 for a 2-hour tasting. And in New Jersey, they're usually $200 to $250 and above. This also kind of, right, the person that was doing the tasting wasn't like on the phone, not paying attention to consumers as they were passing by. Because they sold in the product, they were invested in moving the product out of the store. So that's a definitely a different way of doing it, but you may want to ask your distributors if that's something they can do with their employees, because these are a lot of these kids' first time out of college, right? First job. So they're not being paid at the top. And this is a great way for them to earn some extra money and be able to show retailers that they're the specialists in this field so that they can take other brands on.
That's incredible perspective. Thank you. I feel like you just opened the floodgates that everyone's going to hit you on Slack for all the internal, tell us everything from your perspective. But those are really wonderful things. And I could go down a rabbit hole of all the things that we work on from a distributor relationship management perspective. And you hit on one really key one, being data. There's a lack of data in the category, but the people who do have the data are the distributors, and you can use a lot of that to your advantage.
And Lucinda, by the way, we have Yave exclusive here in New Jersey.
What a lovely plug. I didn't even intentionally do that. It's a great brand. Love the brand. Okay, Jenny, you've had your hand raised really patiently for a while.
Thank you. Yeah, so I kind of touching on like what Kelsey said at the start and just all the conversation about, distributors and expectations. One thing that I see a lot, so I have a contract recruiting agency for shared sales reps in the industry. And my background primarily is BevAlc, and I'm, learning more and merging into this side of the industry too. But what we're seeing right now in the industry is that the lines to get into distributors are just completely out the door. And I do work with more like startup and emerging brands. So they just don't feel like they're in this position to ask for anything. And on the flip side, like Kelsey said, the distributors are saying, you need to have this, you need to have that before we'll even talk to you. And so we're hearing it about the demos, and then we're also hearing it about you have to have market support. Like we don't, our reps aren't going to have time to represent your brand. You're not one of our top, suppliers. So you have to have some feet on the street. So I was curious kind of your thoughts around that, because that does, put that urgency there to get a sales team up and running. I think this is where fractional can be a good model, but like any sales hire, whether it's fractional or not, they still need that, the training and the support to be successful. So that's kind of one of my questions. And then the other is, distributor management, I think is such a funny, ambiguous, overly generalized term.
Yeah.
And this gets, I get caught up in this all the time with clients, because I'll say, no, they don't do distributor management. But then it's like, well, do they do GSMs? Do they do work with? So then I'm like, no, okay. So they do all distributor management as it relates to like account facing distributor management. When I was a distributor manager, I was writing pricing and inventory and running DAs and writing incentives, so I guess that's just like a gripe. We need to differentiate these terms and have distributor management like as it relates to like account facing, and then distributor management as it relates to like running the distributor teams and writing QBRs and all those things. So
yeah,
any thoughts around that? But
no, I love it. And thank you for bringing up the idea of a fractional sales team. I've seen more of this in probably the last year and a half that I did the previous like 20 years in the BevAlc business. And I love that it's a more ubiquitous concept now, because I think it's an attainable model for much smaller companies. And I love that that gives us access to work in markets and have different conversations with distributors. And what was not reflected in this presentation, Jenny, was that was actually my recommendation for the California launch for Yave, was invest in a really great distributor partner to start. And then when they build those sales, figure out when you plug in fractional. Like I've got emails out to fractional salespeople, trying to find, right. And then once you build to that next level of sales, then you'll know the right time to invest in maybe a full-time account facing distributor manager or account facing sales rep, really. But I can't implore the people on this team to consider that enough. Not all companies are created equal. And Jenny, I'm sure you probably know a lot about your competition and could probably share a lot too. But I've come up against some that I don't think will provide the value. And to Jenny, your point, I think it's entirely in the training and expectations they have for that sales team. Same way I was speaking about whether it's an in-house, your own sales team in-house or a fractional, you want to have the same sort of goals and expectations in place. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the verbiage about who manages what and distributor manager and all of that is so vague that it confuses a lot of people. And if I figure out how to make that clear for everyone, I will.
We have to all do it together.
Yeah. Thank you.
We do have a few suppliers that use CMC. We have 4 suppliers that support CMC. We have a North person, and they basically weekly send to us their sales. So they're like, they have to send it to the company they work for, they're supporting, but then they also send it to us, and I make sure we do all the follow-up to make sure he got the order in. Obviously he can't bill the order, so we have to bill it for him, and any follow-ups that we need to do. So that's been successful for us also.
It's awesome. I don't see any other questions unless anybody has anything else.
Yeah, well, thanks for hanging in and answering questions, and for everybody that brought a great question. Thank you, and for the feedback and different perspectives, because it is exciting to hear from brands, distributors, consultants, sampling companies, like all in one breath. It's to hear all the different perspectives. So I love that. So, well, I thank you everybody for your time, and I guess we will see everyone in December. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day and a happy Halloween.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.